At the end of the shift, the tattered clothing stock clerk was ignored by everyone as he helped a bent-over lady carry heavy bags. To the neighborhood, he was nothing more than a poor man with no future. Until an hour later, his name flashed on TV, linked to an influential woman no one had imagined. The scornful laughter of those who ignored him turned into silence. Ethan walked down a narrow street at the end of his shift. It was early evening, and the streetlights were dim. He wore a second-hand jacket with faded colors. The jacket offered little warmth against the cool air. His shoes were worn out, and the soles were thin. He carried a small backpack that contained a simple notebook and an old cell phone. The pavement under his feet was cracked, and he had to watch his step. The neighborhood in Atlanta felt quiet. The low buildings showed peeling paint. Some windows were open a bit, releasing the smell of cheap fried food into the air. A few neighbors stood on their porches, speaking in hushed tones. They looked tired. Cars passed slowly, avoiding potholes. The glow of a weak sunset mixed with the orange and purple sky, but there was no comfort in it. Ethan was 19 and African American. He had short, neatly trimmed hair. His frame was thin from long hours of work. He tried to keep his back straight and his head up. He wanted to appear calm, even if he felt worn inside. He worked as a stock clerk at a local supermarket. It was not a respected job, but it paid some of the bills. Few people noticed him when he walked home. He continued along the street, taking in the familiar sights. The sidewalks were uneven, and the streetlights cast a weak yellow glow. He saw old cars and a few people who barely glanced at him. He understood that everyone was busy with their own problems. He had no reason to expect attention or help. When he reached his apartment building, he climbed a set of worn steps. Inside, the place smelled of old cooking oil and mildew. His mother rested on a couch in the small living room. She suffered from chronic pain and could not work full-time. His younger brother, only 10, slept on a thin mattress in the bedroom they shared. The apartment was cramped and poorly lit. The furniture was old and mismatched, and the walls were stained. Ethan tried not to wake them as he entered. He had returned from a long day of lifting boxes and stacking shelves. His muscles ached. The supermarket paid him a small wage that barely covered the rent, utilities, and his mother's medicine. They were often late on bills, and he worried about receiving an eviction notice. Still, he kept quiet. Complaining would not change anything. He sat down on a worn chair and thought about his life. He woke up early each day to help prepare a simple breakfast. After that, he walked to the supermarket, where he spent hours in the stockroom. He moved heavy boxes and arranged products on shelves. Most customers never noticed him. He was just another worker in a worn uniform. Late in the evening, he returned home to the same cramped apartment and the same unpaid bills. He wondered if there was any way out of this cycle. He had dreams once, maybe of taking some classes or applying for a scholarship. But without money or connections, those dreams seemed distant. Outside, the streetlights flickered. He could hear distant voices from other apartments. Some people argued, some laughed quietly. He understood that everyone in this neighborhood struggled in their own way. The air smelled of stale cooking oil, and there were signs of neglect everywhere. But this was home, and he accepted it for what it was. He opened his backpack and took out his notebook. The pages were yellowed from use. He sometimes wrote down ideas or notes about programs he had heard of. He had tried to search for opportunities using his old cell phone, but the internet was slow, and he had no guidance. The whole process seemed too complicated. After a while, he decided to rest. He turned off the small lamp. He knew that tomorrow would be the same, waking up early, working hard, and returning late. He felt trapped, but he kept his doubts to himself. He had no choice. He had to support his family as best he could. As he drifted off to sleep, he thought about his younger brother. The boy deserved better. Maybe one day Ethan would find a way to improve their lives. For now, the best he could do was wake up and try again. The next morning, Ethan woke up before sunrise. He moved quietly in the dim apartment. His mother was awake, sitting on the couch and sipping a cup of weak coffee. He reheated stale bread from yesterday for breakfast. They had no fresh groceries. He gave his mother the last egg they had, and he took only a small piece of bread for himself. He prepared a cup of hot water with a bit of sugar for his younger brother, who was still asleep. After this simple meal, Ethan took a short, lukewarm shower. The water pipes rattled behind the old walls. He dressed in the same clothes as before, then stepped out into the cold morning air. The streets were dark, and a few people headed to their early jobs. Some drifted aimlessly, and others waited for buses. He passed closed shops and buildings with boarded windows. He knew every crack in the sidewalk on his route to the supermarket. At the supermarket, the manager arrived to unlock the doors. Ethan entered the building and went to the back room. He stacked boxes of canned goods, cereals, and other items. He arranged them so they would be ready for the sales floor. The work was repetitive and tiring. He lifted heavy boxes, loaded carts, and tried not to fall behind schedule. He rarely interacted with customers. Most did not even notice who stocked the shelves. If someone asked for a product, he pointed it out and returned to his task. The supervisors observed him sometimes, but they did not praise him. They expected him to work without complaint. He knew he was replaceable. As he worked, he thought about his brother's school. The boy faced many challenges. The teachers were trying, but the system was underfunded. Students lacked books and materials. Ethan worried about his brother's future. He wanted him to do well, but the odds were against them. Still, Ethan kept working. He had no time to dwell on problems he could not solve. Around midday, Ethan took a short break. He ate a small lunch he had brought from home. It was just a piece of bread and some leftover beans. In the break room, other employees talked to each other, but Ethan stayed silent. He had no close friends there. He washed his hands after eating and returned to the stockroom. The afternoon passed in the same way as the morning, lifting, organizing, and preparing items. By the end of his shift, his body ached. He clocked out, received no acknowledgement, and stepped outside. The sky was dull, and the air smelled of car exhaust. He followed his usual route home, passing the same tired streets and faded signs. People hurried by, not noticing him. On the way home, Ethan recalled how security guards sometimes watched him closely when he entered stores. Some customers at the supermarket avoided him. He felt their suspicion because of his appearance and circumstances. He did not talk about it, but it weighed on him. He knew he was seen as just another young black man in a poor neighborhood. This reality bothered him, but he had learned to accept it quietly. Back at the apartment, he found his mother resting again. She had cooked a simple meal with whatever they had. He ate in silence. Later, his younger brother showed him some homework. It was basic math, but the boy seemed distracted. The conditions at home made it hard to focus. Ethan tried to encourage him. He told him school was important, but he felt uncertain. He himself did not know how to improve their situation. After dinner, Ethan helped his brother review a few problems, but the boy struggled. The apartment was noisy and cramped. Dripping water from a faucet in the bathroom added to the tension. Ethan did his best to stay patient, but he felt powerless. How could he teach the value of education when he himself was stuck in a dead-end job? Later, Ethan sat alone and opened his old notebook again. He scanned notes about possible job training programs, scholarships, and courses he had heard of. He had never pursued them. He lacked the time, money, and confidence. He did not know if he had the ability to study at a higher level. He worried that he was not smart enough to compete for a scholarship. He had no one to guide him or explain the process. He considered their financial situation. The rent was overdue, and the landlord could increase it at any moment. Their electricity bill was a constant threat. His mother needed medication, and the kitchen shelves were nearly empty. He tried to think of solutions, but everything required money or connections he did not have. Before going to bed, Ethan reflected on his day. He had worked hard, just like every other day. He had earned a small wage that barely covered anything. He felt vulnerable and trapped. He doubted his own potential. Perhaps he would remain a stock clerk forever, lifting boxes and returning home exhausted. The idea made him uneasy, but he had no concrete plan. Still, he decided he would continue. Tomorrow he would wake up early again, help prepare breakfast, and return to the supermarket. He would keep searching for some vague chance to improve his life. He had no details, but he clung to the possibility that something might change. Ethan turned off the light. The room was dark, and he lay down on the thin mattress beside his sleeping brother. He closed his eyes, aware that this cycle repeated day after day. He accepted it for now. He would handle tomorrow when it came, just as he had done before. The next morning, Ethan woke up feeling tired, but he went through the same routine. He helped prepare a simple breakfast with what little they had. He ate quietly, washed quickly, then stepped outside to begin his walk to work. The streets looked the same. The old cars, the rundown buildings, and the tired people all seemed part of a repeating pattern. He tried not to think too much about it. He just moved forward. At the supermarket, Ethan arrived a few minutes before his shift. He checked in and went to the back room. The manager was already there. He was an older man with a hard expression. He rarely smiled and always seemed suspicious. He watched Ethan, making sure every minute of Ethan's time was used for work. If Ethan slowed down, even for a moment, the manager would give him a look of disapproval. Ethan lifted boxes and placed them on shelves. He arranged items according to a chart on the wall. He knew the routine by heart. While he worked, he noticed that the manager kept an eye on him. The manager made small comments, such as telling him to move faster or to place items more neatly. He never said anything encouraging. He rarely addressed Ethan by name, just called him kid or you. These daily reminders of his position made Ethan feel small. He understood that the manager did not trust him. He felt as if he were expected to fail at any moment. He tried not to take it personally, but it was hard. The feeling weighed on him. He understood that as a young black man in a poor area, there were those who saw him as a potential problem. He had no choice but to keep working, to show that he was reliable and honest. Still, the suspicion hurt him inside. When Ethan took a short break, he noticed the security guard following him with his eyes. The guard pretended to be busy, but Ethan felt that he was being watched more closely than other employees. The guard sometimes followed him down aisles, as if expecting him to steal something. It never happened, of course, but the attention made Ethan uneasy. He realized that the world around him was set up to doubt him. He had accepted this as part of life, yet it still bothered him. As he worked, Ethan recalled his past. He remembered being a child and seeing his father only a few times. He remembered a day when his father lifted him onto his shoulders so he could see a holiday parade. He had been so happy that day. Shortly after, his father left and never came back. There was no proper explanation. His mother said he had debts and problems with money. Maybe he had run away to avoid them. Ethan never knew the whole truth. Growing up without a father had created a feeling of insecurity in Ethan. He learned that he could not rely on others. He had to make his own way, even as a child. As the oldest son, he took on responsibilities early. He helped around the house, and as soon as he was old enough, he started working part-time jobs to support his family. His mother rarely spoke about the past, but the absence of his father was always felt. It left a mark on Ethan's life. He learned not to depend on anyone and not to expect support from the outside world. The afternoon passed slowly. Ethan continued moving boxes and arranging items on shelves. He followed the store's rules, did his job, and avoided drawing attention. When the manager criticized him for taking too long to open a new box, Ethan just nodded and worked faster. When a customer gave him a suspicious look, he did not react. He accepted it as normal. He was used to it. After his shift ended, Ethan stepped outside. The air was cool and the sky was a dull gray. He walked home, passing the same buildings and cracked sidewalks. He thought about the system he lived in. It was not just one person who doubted him. It was a set of circumstances that made it hard for someone like him to rise above. He knew about scholarships and programs, but he had no idea how to apply. He heard that there were opportunities, but they seemed complicated and out of reach. He returned home to find his mother lying on the couch, trying to ease her pain. His younger brother struggled with his homework again. They had no money for tutors or extra classes. The school did what it could, but there were too many students and not enough resources. Ethan wanted to help, but he had limited knowledge and was always tired after work. That evening he sat in silence, thinking about his father. He tried not to dwell on it often, but on days like this, the memory returned. He wondered what kind of man leaves his family and disappears. He wondered if he had inherited any of his father's weaknesses. Perhaps he was afraid that he would fail, like his father did. He tried to push these thoughts aside. He knew he had a job to do, support his family, and survive. Ethan went to bed early. He needed rest. Tomorrow would come, and he would face the same challenges again. There was no easy path, but he had no choice. He had learned to live with disappointment, suspicion, and limited opportunities. It was not ideal, but he could handle it. As he closed his eyes, he hoped that one day something would change. For now, he would keep going. The next day started like all the others. Ethan woke up, helped prepare a simple breakfast, and got ready for work. The tension in the apartment was growing. The landlord had stopped by the day before and mentioned raising the rent if they did not pay on time. The electricity bill was late, and the notice warned of disconnection. Ethan's mother tried not to mention it, but he knew their situation was getting worse. He left home and made his way along the familiar streets. He saw people leaving their buildings, heading to work, or standing around waiting for something to happen. He passed a few men who were talking loudly about a local problem. He ignored them and kept walking. He focused on his duties. He had no time to waste. At the supermarket, the day started as usual. Ethan lifted boxes, sorted products, and worked without complaint. He avoided the manager's eyes and tried to stay busy. He felt a heaviness in his chest. He wondered if he would ever find a way out. The more he thought about it, the more anxious he became. He asked himself if he had the intelligence or courage to apply for a scholarship or any course that could improve his life. It seemed unlikely. He believed he might fail. He doubted himself deeply. When his shift ended that evening, Ethan left the supermarket feeling drained. He walked home with his shoulders slightly hunched. On his way, he thought about his future. Perhaps this was his life, working a low-paying job, barely managing the bills and never escaping the cycle. The thought made him feel small and defeated. He approached a busy intersection on his route home. Cars rushed by and the drivers seemed impatient. Horns honked, and the sound of engines filled the air. People crossed the street quickly, trying to avoid getting caught in traffic. As Ethan waited for a chance to cross, he noticed an elderly woman standing nearby. She carried several heavy grocery bags, and she looked nervous. She was small and bent slightly forward, trying to keep her balance. She hesitated at the curb, afraid to step out. Without thinking twice, Ethan moved closer. He spoke to her in a calm voice. He asked if she needed help. The woman looked at him, surprised that someone had offered assistance. She nodded. He reached for her bags and lifted them, careful not to drop anything. He stepped into the street slowly, looking both ways to make sure it was safe. He guided the woman, making sure she could cross without fear. The traffic light changed, and they managed to reach the other side, Once there, the elderly woman thanked him. She said she lived nearby and asked if he could help carry the bags a bit further. Ethan agreed. He walked with her for a short distance until they reached her small home. It was an old house, but well kept. She explained that she was a widow who lived alone. She had no one to help her with her errands. Her voice sounded emotional as she expressed gratitude. Ethan smiled politely. He did not consider his action extraordinary. He knew how it felt to struggle, and he wanted to help. He set the bags down near her door. The woman offered him a glass of water, and he accepted. Inside the house, the furniture was old but neat. She thanked him again, and he nodded, saying it was no problem at all. He did not ask her name, and she did not ask for his. For Ethan, this was just a small act of kindness. After finishing the water, Ethan said goodbye and stepped outside. The sun was setting, and the sky had a faint orange glow. He felt a little lighter, as if doing a good deed reminded him that he still had control over some parts of his life. He headed toward his apartment, unaware that his simple action would have serious consequences later. That night, Ethan returned to his home. His mother and brother were waiting. He felt the same tension, the same financial worries. He knew their problems had not disappeared. Still, he did not mention the elderly woman. He saw no reason to bring it up. It was just something he had done without expecting anything in return. As he lay down on his thin mattress, he thought about that moment of crossing the street. It had felt good to help someone in need. Despite his doubts about himself, he had acted kindly and without hesitation. Maybe it meant he was not as trapped as he felt. Maybe he could still do something meaningful, even if it was small. With that thought, he closed his eyes and tried to rest. Early the next morning, Ethan woke up feeling the same weight on his shoulders. He ate a small breakfast with his family, then left for work as usual. The streets looked the same and the air felt cool. He walked along, thinking about the day ahead. He had no idea that his life was about to change in a way he did not expect. After his shift ended that evening, Ethan returned home. He sat down in the small living room, hoping to rest for a moment. His mother sat nearby, holding her hands together. She seemed worried about their ongoing financial problems. The television was on at low volume. The news channel aired local stories and interviews with community members. Ethan paid little attention at first. Suddenly, he heard his own name. He looked up at the screen in surprise. The reporter was talking about an anonymous act of kindness captured on a cell phone by a passerby. Ethan watched as blurry footage showed him helping the elderly woman cross the busy street and carry her bags home. His face was clearly visible. He was shocked to see himself on TV. The reporter explained that the woman he helped was Evelyn Parker, a respected author and philanthropist. The reporter mentioned that Evelyn Parker had influenced many people through her work and supported various educational programs. The footage caught public attention because it was rare to see such help in a neighborhood known for its hardships. The anchor praised Ethan's kindness, calling it a simple but meaningful gesture. Ethan's heart raced. He had never been on TV before. He had helped the woman without expecting any reward. He never imagined anyone would record it. He felt both proud and nervous. What would people think? He worried that some might believe he only helped her because she was important. He also wondered what this attention would mean for his daily life. His mother looked at him with wide eyes. She did not know what to say. His younger brother stood near the doorway, surprised as well. Ethan tried to calm himself. He thought about what this exposure could bring. Maybe it would bring positive attention, or maybe it would bring problems. The next morning, Ethan got ready for work, trying to act as if nothing was unusual. As he stepped outside, the neighbors seemed to look at him more closely. Some pointed in his direction, whispering. On his way to the supermarket, he noticed a few people stopping to stare. They had seen the news. He tried to ignore them and focused on getting through the day. At the supermarket, he entered the back room, and started organizing boxes. He hoped his co-workers had not seen the report. He wanted to remain quiet and invisible as he was before, but it did not take long for curious glances to appear. Some employees whispered in the aisles. The manager watched him carefully, as if trying to understand what kind of person Ethan was. Ethan tried to keep his head down and do his job. He felt uneasy. He remembered that the TV segment praised him, but he was not used to praise. He worried that people might misunderstand his motives. He wondered if they would think he wanted attention, or that he expected a reward from Evelyn Parker. None of that was true. He had acted without any hidden purpose. By the end of the day, Ethan felt tense and tired. He returned home, where his mother asked if everything was all right. He said it was fine, even though he felt uncertain. They still had unpaid bills and no solution to their financial problems. He had to work at the supermarket and continue living as before. Yet now, his name and face had been shown on TV, connected to a well-known philanthropist. As he lay down that night, he kept thinking about the coverage. He did not know what would happen next. He hoped that after a few days people would lose interest and life would return to normal. He tried to calm himself by thinking that the report only showed a positive action. It did not accuse him of anything wrong. He closed his eyes, still feeling a slight unease. He had stepped into the public eye without meaning to. Now he would have to deal with whatever came next. The following morning, Ethan woke up early as usual. He ate a small breakfast and headed out to work. He hoped things would settle down. However, when he arrived at the supermarket, he sensed a changed atmosphere. Several co-workers looked at him differently. Some seemed curious, others skeptical. He tried to ignore this and focused on his tasks. As he moved boxes in the back room, Ethan overheard two employees discussing him quietly. One asked if he had planned the whole event. The other shrugged, uncertain. The word stung. Ethan never planned to be on TV. He wanted no fame. He had simply helped someone who needed it, but rumors were starting to form, and he had no control over them. During his lunch break, Ethan sat alone at a small table in the break room. A co-worker approached and asked if he had known who the woman was. Ethan shook his head and said he had no idea. The co-worker nodded but did not look convinced. Ethan realized people might doubt his honesty, which upset him. Later in the afternoon, he learned that a local blogger had posted a video questioning his sincerity. The blogger suggested Ethan recognized Evelyn Parker and staged his help to gain something. The blogger made it seem like Ethan was looking for a reward. The rumor spread online, and some customers arriving at the supermarket whispered about it. Ethan felt angry and helpless. He could not control what strangers said about him. He tried to talk to a co-worker he trusted, but the co-worker seemed nervous and offered no real support. Everyone was cautious, afraid that being seen as on Ethan's side might draw unwanted attention. Ethan felt isolated. He had done nothing wrong, yet people were treating him as if he had a hidden agenda. When he returned home that evening, he found his mother anxious. She heard rumors from neighbors. She told Ethan to be careful. She worried that if people believed he tried to profit from a simple kind act, it might cause more stress. They did not need more problems. His younger brother asked questions, but Ethan had no clear answers. He said he did nothing wrong, but the boy did not fully understand the situation. Ethan spent time searching on his old cell phone for information about Evelyn Parker. The connection was slow. He learned she was a famous writer and supported several educational projects. She had donated scholarships to students in need. He wondered if people thought he wanted such a scholarship. It was absurd. He had never expected anything. He just helped her cross the street, but he realized he could not explain himself to everyone. Over the next few days, the tension at work did not ease. The manager watched him closely, as if expecting Ethan to ask for favors. Some employees avoided him, afraid of being caught in the drama. Ethan tried to work quietly. He restocked shelves, followed instructions, and took no breaks longer than allowed. But he felt uncomfortable. He missed the anonymity he once had. At home, the family situation remained difficult. Bills were overdue. The threat of losing their apartment was real. Ethan thought about applying for a job somewhere else, but he had no leads. His skills were limited to manual labor. He felt trapped and frustrated. Instead of receiving support or understanding, he became the center of strange rumors. Every night, Ethan lay awake, replaying recent events in his mind. He could not believe how quickly a good deed had turned into a complicated mess. The attention he received brought no benefit, only suspicion. He wanted to disappear from public view, to become invisible again. As he fell asleep on this particular night, he felt a growing sense of unease. He did not know how to fix this situation. He had tried to ignore it, but the rumors spread without his control. He wondered if it would ever end, or if something worse would happen next. Over the following days, life did not improve for Ethan. He continued to work at the supermarket, restocking shelves and handling heavy boxes. He did everything he could to stay unnoticed, but the environment had changed. A few co-workers remained polite, but most kept their distance. Some believed the rumors they read online. Others simply did not want to get involved. At home, his mother asked him many questions. She worried that the sudden attention might lead to some unexpected trouble. She told him to be careful about what he said to strangers. She advised him not to trust anyone who might try to interview him or ask for details. His younger brother listened quietly. The boy asked if this situation would end soon. Ethan said he did not know. They still had no money for overdue bills. The landlord had stopped by again, reminding them that the rent was late. There was a threat of raising the rent or even eviction if they could not pay soon. This created tension in the small apartment. The electric bill also weighed on their minds. Every month, it seemed harder to cover basic expenses. Ethan tried to talk with one of his co-workers who used to be friendly. He hoped to find someone who understood that he never wanted publicity. But the co-worker avoided the conversation, saying he had to get back to work. Ethan realized that no one wanted to be linked to him. He was no longer just a quiet stock clerk. Now people saw him as someone involved in a strange story with a wealthy philanthropist. Online, the rumors grew. Some people insisted Ethan must have recognized Evelyn Parker. Others said he had probably hoped for a reward. A few defended him, suggesting that a good deed could be honest. But Ethan had no way to influence these discussions. He did not have active social media accounts, and he did not know how to clear his name. He felt powerless. He considered quitting his job and looking for work elsewhere. But where would he go? He lacked education, and the supermarket was one of the few stable jobs he had ever held. Also, if he quit, he might lose what little income he had. His family needed every penny. He felt trapped. He had to keep working and endure the strange looks and whispers. At night, he lay awake, thinking about the future. Could he stand this level of distrust and discomfort forever? He had done nothing wrong, yet people questioned his character. He wondered if it might have been better if he had not helped that woman. He felt guilty for thinking that, but he could not ignore the difficulties that followed his act of kindness. His mother noticed how quiet he had become. She asked him if he was all right. He said he was fine, but his voice lacked confidence. He felt as if he were on a stage, being judged by everyone. He had never asked for attention, yet now he could not escape it. The world seemed eager to pick apart his motives. His younger brother also sensed the tension. The boy struggled with school assignments and had trouble focusing. Ethan tried to help, but he felt distracted by his own problems. He wanted to set a good example, but he worried that he was failing. He felt like he could not protect his family from their financial troubles or from the strange rumors spreading outside. As days passed, Ethan's patience wore thin. He considered giving up on any hope for improvement. Maybe he would remain stuck in this situation forever. Maybe he would never find a better job or receive fair treatment. The idea of applying for scholarships or training programs seemed useless. Even if he tried, people might say he did it to gain sympathy. He almost felt like withdrawing completely. He came home tired and silent, ate dinner quietly, and went to bed early. He stopped writing notes in his old notebook. He no longer bothered to search for opportunities on his slow cell phone. He felt defeated. This was the point where he nearly gave up on any hope of a better future. Still, he continued going to work, and he kept doing his job as expected. He had responsibilities. He knew that if he gave up, his family would suffer more. He pushed through the discomfort and suspicion. He told himself that maybe one day things would calm down. But deep inside, he doubted it. A week later, when Ethan arrived at the supermarket, he noticed a different kind of tension in the air. His co-workers spoke in low tones, exchanging glances. He started working as usual, lifting boxes in the back room. After a while, a supervisor approached him looking uneasy. She said that someone important would be visiting today. Ethan asked who it was, but the supervisor just shrugged and walked away. Curious, Ethan finished placing items on the shelves and went out to the store floor. He saw a small group of people near the front entrance. Among them stood Evelyn Parker herself. She was speaking to a store manager, and a few reporters stood nearby. The sight made Ethan's heart race. Why was she here? He tried to remain calm and stepped back, hoping not to draw attention. But Evelyn Parker looked around and spotted him. She recognized him from the footage and walked toward him. The reporters followed, their cameras rolling. Ethan felt trapped and nervous. He did not know what to say. Evelyn Parker spoke in a clear voice, thanking Ethan for helping her that day. She explained that she had learned his name from the news report. She knew about the rumors suggesting Ethan had planned his act. She said she did not believe them. She believed he had acted kindly without expecting anything. Then she made an announcement. She said that she wanted to offer Ethan a full scholarship to a community college program of his choice. She would cover tuition, books, and some living expenses. She hoped this would give him a chance to improve his situation and pursue his goals. The reporters recorded every word. Ethan stood still, shocked by this news. He had never expected such an offer. But as soon as Evelyn Parker finished speaking, he heard whispers and mutterings around him. Some co-workers looked angry or jealous. Others seemed to confirm their suspicions that he wanted a reward all along. The reporters asked him questions. How did he feel about this opportunity? Was he surprised? Ethan struggled to find the right words. He tried to say that he did not know who Evelyn Parker was when he helped her. He explained that he simply wanted to assist an elderly person. But the crowd's reactions were mixed. This new development made things even more complicated. If Ethan accepted the scholarship, people would say he took advantage of the situation. If he refused it, he would lose a chance to improve his life. He saw no easy way out. The tension grew as reporters asked more questions. The store manager watched silently, and the co-workers seemed divided. Evelyn Parker remained calm. She said she understood if Ethan needed time to decide. She said the offer stood regardless of rumors. She believed in rewarding kindness. After that, she and her group left the store, followed by reporters. The silence in the supermarket felt heavy. Ethan stood alone in the aisle, his heart still beating fast. He had no idea what to do. On one hand, a scholarship could change his life. He could study and find a better job. On the other hand, accepting might confirm people's doubts. They might forever label him an opportunist. His co-workers walked away, some shaking their heads, others looking confused. The manager gave him a sharp look, as if expecting Ethan to explain himself. Ethan felt sick with worry. He had not asked for this. He never planned any of it. But now he was in a position where every choice had consequences. At home, his mother and brother stared at him in disbelief when he told them. His mother saw it as a golden chance. She urged him to accept. She said that education could help him escape their desperate situation. His younger brother looked hopeful, thinking that maybe Ethan could get a better job and help the family more. Ethan felt pressure from all sides. He knew he had to make a decision soon. If he waited too long, the offer might disappear. If he accepted, he risked turning the rumors permanent. If he refused, he would remain stuck in the same cycle of poverty and struggle. That night, he lay in bed, unable to sleep. He listened to distant car engines and muffled voices through the thin walls. He realized that nothing would be the same again. This was a crisis that seemed impossible to solve. Either path was risky. He tried to think calmly, but his mind raced. The next morning, he woke up knowing he had to face reality. The tension had reached its peak. He had to choose what kind of future he wanted, regardless of what people thought. He could not remain in this state of uncertainty forever. Ethan woke up early, feeling tense. He had spent the previous night thinking about Evelyn Parker's offer. He had tried to consider all the possibilities. Accepting the scholarship could help him build a better future. It could lead to a better job, more stability, and a chance to support his family properly. But he was afraid. He knew that many people would say he had arranged this from the start. Some co-workers would never believe that he helped Evelyn Parker without knowing who she was. They would assume he had planned everything for personal gain. Yet, Ethan also understood that refusing the scholarship would achieve nothing. Without education or training, he would remain stuck in his current situation. He would continue to work long hours at the supermarket with no opportunity to improve. The bills would keep piling up. His family would continue to struggle. This was a rare chance, and it might never come again. After a quiet breakfast, he left the apartment. He walked slowly to the supermarket. The air felt heavy, but he tried to stay calm. When he arrived, a few co-workers looked at him, waiting to see what he would do. He could not just pretend nothing had changed. Everyone knew about the offer. He started his shift, stacking boxes as always. He felt every eye in the room on him. Finally, he decided he should at least speak to a supervisor. He asked for a brief moment to step outside and make a phone call. The supervisor allowed it, though not without a suspicious look. Ethan stepped behind the building and took out his old cell phone. He found the contact number provided by a representative of Evelyn Parker's foundation. They had left it with the store manager after the visit. Ethan dialed the number, his hand shaking slightly. A calm voice answered. Ethan introduced himself and said he wanted to accept the scholarship. The person on the other end sounded pleased. They explained the next steps. He would need to fill out some forms, choose a suitable program at the community college, and arrange a meeting to finalize the details. The representative also said that Evelyn Parker believed in him, no matter what others said. Ethan thanked them and ended the call. He stood there for a moment, breathing slowly. He had made his decision. He would accept the scholarship. He would face whatever criticism came his way. He had to think about his future and his family's situation. Let people talk. At least he was doing something to improve his life. When he returned to work, his co-workers noticed a change in his expression. He did not announce his decision. He simply continued working as usual. A few people whispered among themselves, guessing that he must have accepted. Ethan did not respond to their looks or comments. He knew that no matter what he said, some would never trust him. That would have to be acceptable. He could not live his life for them. At home that evening, he told his mother and brother that he had decided to accept the scholarship. His mother smiled. She said this was good news. She knew it would not solve all their problems right away, but it was a step in the right direction. His younger brother looked proud and asked if one day Ethan would have a better job. Ethan said he hoped so. They still had to pay bills and deal with the landlord. They still had to worry about the electric bill and the cost of living. But now, there was a possibility of change. Ethan would have to balance work and studying. It would not be easy. He would have to study after his shifts, read books he had never seen before, and learn new skills. He might struggle at first, but he would try his best. The next day, he went to work and found an envelope at the manager's desk. Inside were some initial forms he needed to fill out. The manager said nothing, just handed it over and walked away. Ethan understood that he would get no support from management or co-workers. That was fine. He was not doing this for their approval. After work, Ethan took the forms home. He read them carefully, filling in basic information, his address, his background, and the type of program he was interested in. He thought about what he wanted to study, maybe something practical that could lead to a better-paying job. He knew he would have access to guidance counselors later, but for now, he just needed to show commitment. Over the following days, he began the enrollment process. The representative from Evelyn Parker's foundation guided him through it. He would start in the upcoming semester. He would continue working at the supermarket to earn money for rent and bills, but now he had a reason to believe that things could improve in the future. In those days, the rumors and gossip at the supermarket did not vanish, but people gradually lost interest. They found other things to talk about. Some remained convinced that Ethan was an opportunist. Others stopped caring. A few even congratulated him, though without much enthusiasm. Ethan learned to ignore their opinions. He focused on his tasks, earned his paycheck, and looked forward to the day he would enter a classroom. He understood that his life would not change overnight. He would still come home to an old apartment, still deal with unpaid bills, and still face suspicion. But now he had taken control of his destiny. By accepting the scholarship, he had made a choice for himself and his family. That night, as he lay down on his thin mattress, he felt different. He still had fears. He worried about the workload, his ability to keep up with studies, and how people would treat him at college. But he no longer felt trapped with no options. He had taken a step forward. He had shown himself that he could try something new, even if it was scary. He closed his eyes and tried to rest. Tomorrow would be another long day, but now it had a purpose. He had broken free from total despair. It was not a perfect solution, but it was a start. In the weeks that followed, Ethan settled into a new routine. He continued working at the supermarket, but now he also had to prepare for the start of his classes. He picked up a list of required books, which he would need to study once the semester began. He visited the community college to learn the layout of the campus and find out where his classes would be held. When he walked through the halls of the community college for the first time, he felt a mixture of excitement and nerves. He had no experience with higher education. He did not know what to expect, but he reminded himself that he had survived worse situations. He would try his best and ask for help when needed. The counselors at the college offered to help him choose the right courses. He appreciated their guidance. At work, things remained mostly the same. He lifted boxes, stacked shelves, and listened to occasional whispers behind his back. But now their words had less power over him. He knew that he was working toward something better. The manager still watched him closely, but Ethan felt calmer. He had a goal and a path forward. At home, the financial problems did not vanish, but Ethan felt a stronger sense of purpose. He reviewed notes from orientation sessions at the college. He learned about tutoring services available to help students who struggled in certain subjects. He promised himself he would use all available resources. He might be behind in some areas, but he would work hard to catch up. His mother noticed a slight change in him. He still came home tired, but now he sometimes stayed up a bit longer reading or researching online with his slow cell phone connection. He asked his younger brother about school and tried to encourage him to keep studying. He explained that if he managed to go to college, maybe his brother could too someday. As the semester began, Ethan attended his first classes. He met instructors who explained their course plans. He took notes carefully. He felt awkward at first, unsure if he belonged there, but no one at the college seemed to doubt him. The other students were focused on their own goals. Some were older, some younger, but everyone was there to learn something new. Balancing work and study was hard. Ethan woke up early, prepared breakfast, worked a full shift at the supermarket, and then studied at night. He often felt exhausted, but he reminded himself that this effort was temporary. With each assignment completed, he gained a bit of confidence. He saw that he could learn new material if he tried hard enough. Over time, the rumors about his supposed motives faded. People moved on to other stories. Some co-workers began treating him normally again. Others remained distant, but he no longer cared. He focused on improving his performance at college. He asked questions in class, visited the library, and learned how to find reliable information. He still had to pay the bills, help his mother, and keep the lights on. He still lived in the same old apartment in the same struggling neighborhood. But now, he was not completely trapped. He saw a possible future where he could apply for better jobs, perhaps move to a slightly better place, and offer his brother more support. It would take time, but he had started the process. As months passed, Ethan adapted to his new life. He learned to plan his days carefully. He understood that progress would be slow. He did not expect miracles. He only wanted to be better off than before. Each step forward was a small victory. Completing a homework assignment, passing a quiz, or understanding a concept he did not know before. He accepted that life was still hard. He had not escaped poverty yet. But now he had hope. He had a direction. He had the support of Evelyn Parker's scholarship, which allowed him to study without drowning in tuition costs. He appreciated the help, even if it came with misunderstandings. On a quiet evening, he sat in the kitchen with his mother and younger brother. The single light bulb above them flickered slightly. He told them about his first tests and how he did better than he expected. His mother smiled, relief in her eyes. His brother looked up to him, seeing that there was more to life than their current struggles. Ethan realized that the act of helping Evelyn Parker on the street had changed everything. It led to confusion, rumors, and stress, but it also opened a door. He had walked through that door, accepting the scholarship despite the risks. Now he stood in a place where he could grow and learn. He was still the same person at the core, but now he believed he could do more. He saw a future that was not limited to stocking shelves. He understood that even if the world did not applaud him, he could move forward on his own terms. As he prepared for another early morning, he felt tired, but determined. He had discovered that small changes could lead to bigger ones. He still faced the same city streets, the same old building, and the same financial pressures. But now he carried something extra inside him, a sense of possibility.